this is a second order problem, the filter bubble. But at least when you are working in the library world, this problem occurs in your head very early when you think about user data. So that is why we have invited Peter Svarre. Peter Svarre has his own consultancy company, and some of you may know his name from the Danish website called communicationforum.dk, where he writes article. And actually the way we discovered Peter in this occasion was the article called The Filter Bubble. So I'll give the word to you. Yeah.
Thanks. Well, yes, besides writing articles and actually writing a book, which is coming out in February about social media and digital strategy, I'm also one of those people that David Kay talked about. I'm one of those evil guys from the outside. I work for banks, I work for retail companies, I work for media companies. So basically, you shouldn't listen to what I'm saying. Just get back to your laptops and your cell phones. And, no, I definitely hope that there is something that you can take away from my presentation today, especially because my line of business for the last 10 years has been working with usability, UX, user testing. So I've probably done personally 200 user tests. And in the end of the day, that basically gives you a pretty good idea of what are the needs on the internet, what are people able to understand and cope with when you're talking digital interfaces. And I'm not addressing that specifically here, but it's kind of it's like an undercurrent in everything that I'm doing and saying and writing actually. But today it's really about personalization, which is like my word for what we call user tracks, and there are many words for this thing. And personalization has been around for a lot of years on the internet, but in my perspective, it really took a great leap forward a couple of years ago when Facebook introduced this thing called Facebook Connect, and it's now called the social graph or the open graph in Facebook. But back then it was called Facebook Connect. And one of the first things that really impressed me is this thing that I'm going to show you here. It was one of the first implementations with Facebook Connect. And basically Facebook Connect is a system where you can connect your social data in Facebook with whatever your creativity allows. In this case, it's an advertising for a computer game, so I'll just show you that. And the first part here is basically where it just shows you the page, and this is where you log in with Facebook Connect, and then the actual ad begins. Basically what this ad did was it went into my Facebook profile, it sucked out all of my pictures, which you could basically see. It sucked out some information where I work, my previous employer. It said my credit card information as well, which was not, it was just a fictive number, but it just gave you the impression that, oh my God, it knows everything about me. And we've seen a couple of things like this afterwards, and a lot of creative implementations in the advertising world, but this is only a beginning of what I would call this digital world of me. And we're seeing this everywhere. I'll just show you a couple of examples of this. And this is actually a project that I'm working on myself, which is called My Social News. It's basically a newsreader where you share your news with your friends. So you log into My Social News, and then you see which ones of your friends are members of the site, and you log in with Facebook. And then whenever you read something, it basically logs what you're reading, which articles you're reading, and then it aggregates on this page, which you can see here, it says friends are reading. You can basically see what are your friends reading in this site. So, and the thing about this is that we've been talking about personalization and collaborative filtering and all these advanced, they came, talked about some of these things as well. It's pretty advanced stuff. And I'm not a very advanced person and not very mathematically inclined either, but this is extremely simple because the only thing it actually does is it looks at what are your friends reading, and then it's aggregating that, and then it's showing me how many of my friends are reading which articles. And the interesting thing is it works. It's not very complicated, but it works, and the reason why it works is because what my friends on Facebook are reading is kind of the same stuff that I'm interested in. And if I want to go a little more into details, then actually there's a drop down from friends reading, then it looks at the subgroups that Facebook are creating, so close friends, work friends, colleagues, etc., etc. And then you can dive into those and get even more detail there. So that's just one example. Another example is Hunch, which is one of my favorite sites right now. This is way more mathematically advanced. It's basically a site where they ask you questions like this. Which of these living room designs do you like most? And they do it in a funny, kind of engaging way. So you actually feel that it's fun to answer these questions. I think I've probably answered 200 of these questions. Because it kind of tells you a little, it challenges you, and it tells you a little about yourself. Which one of these would I like? And it's like, yeah, I'm kind of that person. And then they just shovel all of that information into the database, and then they use that to provide you with recommendations on clothing, I guess in this case, computer games, music, etc., etc., etc. Another example, music. I mean, David talked about the press button. I mean, I don't know, do you listen to music in any other way than that today? I mean, I listen to music on my phone on a program called Groove Shark, and I just press a button which is called radio, and that's my personalized music played directly from the cloud. I don't have one single MP3 file or anything on my phone. It just plays the music that I like. Sometimes I search for something specifically, but most of the time it's basically just a flow of music that they think I like. And then of course, I mean, even your friends. I mean, you don't have to go look for friends now. Facebook can actually tell you people that you may know. So, I mean, why bother with going out, or you can just go here and find your friends. So, the thing is, I mean, what we're experiencing here is that we're living in a world where information comes to us, and the thing is that the generation, the younger generation, and this is basically your future clients and I mean the students, this generation actually, if the information doesn't come to them, then they will think that this information is probably not important. So if it's not served to them, it's probably not important. And it sounds ridiculous for people like me. I'm 39 years old. I've done like 2 master's degrees in like old physical libraries and search for information the old school way. But I mean, when you talk to these guys who are 20 or younger than that, you can basically feel that what they're saying is that if it doesn't come to me, it's probably not important. So what does this mean for libraries? Well, the way it used to be. This is the last library I visited. I studied at Columbia University. This is Butler Library, and I also went to the one right down here, but I specifically mentioned this one because the fascinating thing about this library was it was a little like the library in Humberto Eco was the name of the rose. It was like in this building there was something like 17 floors crammed in. That's when I was walking here. And there were actually books on the shelves in Fjolsted. You would just tell them which book, and they would bring you the book here. You could actually walk around and touch the books and feel the books, and it was all dark. And you would walk into an aisle, light would come on, and you would be completely alone in there for like maybe several hours. It was deeply fascinating. And I mean, what was it like back then? Well, there's filing cards. You would kind of flick through filing cards. There would be physical bookshelves, as I talked about. You would actually do active searching, and meaning that you would know if you search for something, you needed an author, subject, or a book title. And then, what I think is probably the most important thing, because when I think back to when I was a student 12 years ago, the way you build up relevance was a manual process. You would start out going to your lecturer, and then you would ask him, which books should I read for this course or this assignment, and he would give you a couple of books. Then you would read the books or skim the books or whatever. And then you would look at the literature at the end of the book, and then you would realize, oh yeah, he's mentioned it. And then you read another book, and then the same author was mentioned. So, oh, he's probably relevant. Then third book, oh, he's even more relevant. So you would build up that field of relevance manually, which is, I mean, something that you totally do not do anymore when you search for on Amazon, you use my social media, whatever. Manual relevance is something that's built for you. Then you had the interaction with librarians, pretty important as well. When you got stuck, you needed that link, that kind of, that you couldn't make yourself. You were stuck in kind of maybe one academic area, and then the librarian could tell you maybe you should look at phenomenology or read Foucault or whatever. And then the serendipitous discoveries on the shelves, and that's why I mentioned about the library. You would actually go to the shelf to look for one book that you search for, and then suddenly you say, oh my god, there's another book that's relevant. You start kind of looking at that book, etc., etc. And then sometimes even you would also make these topical connections through physical proximity. I think I built a lot of my assignments at the university by searching for one book or two books, and then suddenly I was in an area in the library which was all about this topical area, and I was like, okay, here is my assignment. I just need to pull out these 10 books, and that's basically the assignment that I'm going to write. All of this is gone today. And of course, I mean, a lot of it was really tedious and manual, with like filing cards. I mean, who wants to work with filing cards anymore? But some of the last things, the serendipitous discoveries, the topical connections, all of that stuff is basically gone from searching not only libraries and books, but also news and I mean everything that has to do with search. Today, search is basically just search. I mean, it's this search field and nothing else. It's extremely effective, but it also kind of limits out a lot of stuff. So, basically my point is that digitization of everything creates fantastic opportunities, but it also creates some challenges and it creates some responsibilities. And I think this is probably why Jens called me in the beginning, because I wrote this article about some of the challenges and responsibilities related to digitization. So, the opportunities is, first of all, it gives you new ways to search for customers. And on the other hand, the responsibility for you is do not make your customers lazy and do not create filter bubbles. And I'll get back to what I mean with filter bubbles. So, what is personalization? Actually, I haven't been talking about this subject for a couple of years now, but back when Jens called me, I was like, I remember I've been talking about this before, and I searched the internet, and Copenhagen is one of the first, one of the only media in Denmark that's actually storing all of the articles way back. So I searched my own name, Svarre, personalization, pops this article that I wrote on Copenhagen, which is all about what is personalization. And the reason why I wrote that article back in 2003 was because I realized that when people were working with personalization technologies, they didn't really know what they were talking about. And it's actually my impression that this is still the case. And especially when you look at it from the user's perspective. So I created this taxonomy of 4 different types of personalization. Then I reviewed this article and I realized that there's probably a 5th one. And I'll go through those types of personalization, and then we'll talk about what does it mean for the library world from what I'm guessing in my kind of brief understanding of what are academic libraries today, because they're very, very different from when I used to spend time in one of those. So the first one And there are 5 of them. The 5 of them if you're making notes. By the way, this presentation is also on SlideShare. On the very last slide, I'll show you where you can find it. And I think Jens will provide you with a link as well. Basically, the most simple kind of personalization is what you could call interactive elements. It's simply what you see as calculating functions when you go to a bank, a mortgage calculator, you type in some information and you get a personalized answer back. So the answer you get is very much your answer. It's personalized, but it's not very advanced. It doesn't remember what you typed in or anything like that. So it's not really personalization. Which is why it's called the interactive element, but I've put it in there because it's kind of the lowest type of personalization. Then we get to customization, and this is probably what everybody back in 2003 were talking about when they were talking about personalization. Because customization, this is from DMI, you probably all know this webpage. The first time you visit this page, it tells you which front page do you want to visit when you visit DMI. And then you say, well, I live in Copenhagen, Nordsjælland. You click that, and then next time you visit this page, you won't see this page, but only Copenhagen, Nordsjælland. Perfect personalization. So it basically asks you, what do you prefer? And you're like, I prefer this. And then that is what you get. And this is what, in 2003, everybody thought this was personalization. We should have to get people to build their own pages. Every company that I work for, bank, retailer, whatever, they wanted people to create dashboards where they kind of aggregated all kinds of information, and basically we wanted people to spend hours and hours and hours customizing pages where they only spent like 10 seconds, which was ridiculous. And you don't see a lot of kind of that type of personalization anymore. Customization is still really, really important, but what we realize from the user perspective is that it's really hard to get people to customize something. People need to use something repeatedly again and again and again and again, and it has to be like their daily tool. It has to be that one app on your mobile phone that you always use, and you've used it for a couple of months, and then you're like, oh, maybe I'll just customize a little on this, and you will spend like 2 minutes customizing your app, and that's basically it. So we thought that people would spend 2 hours customizing for spending the 10 seconds, and it was actually vice versa, the other way around. So customization is still very important, but we just realized it's really hard to get people to do this. Then there's rule-based personalization, which is the example here is I work for a Danish company called Saxo Bank. They are a platform for doing currency trading, foreign exchange, forex trading, and there's a big market for people doing this, and these are some of the companies that are really investing heavily in personalization and also have rule-based personalization. So basically this is an example where I went to Google, I searched for low pip forex trading. Pip basically means price in forex trading terminology. So low price forex trading. And the result was forextrading.com was the website, and I entered their website, and it said spreads as low as 0.8 pips under, which is kind of cheap, apparently. So basically what they do is they look at what did I search, and then they have a rule on this web page saying, okay, if people have searched for low pips or cheap pips or whatever, something like that, the main message, which is like half of the page, is focusing on exactly this message. And it's very difficult to see how many rules they have. They could have thousands of rules, or maybe they just have 10 rules or something like that. So this is also, it's also a kind of pretty important kind of personalization, but it's also a lot of work. It's not a lot of work for the user, but it's a lot of work for you actually building the website, because you have to create the rules, and then you actually have to implement different web designs. And I've been working with web designs and for like 10 years now, and just creating one web page is a lot of work, especially if you're working with a client, you're an agency, a client. It takes a lot of time. It's really expensive. And when you start working with personalization and rule-based personalization, then you have to create rules, and then you have to create 10 different websites, and you have to agree on all the different 10 different websites. It's just a lot of work, especially in a little market as the Danish market. Then we have the mathematical filtering. which is also what's called collaborative filtering. This is probably what David talked most about, which is basically the black box filtering, where you collect a lot of data and you throw in the data, and then there's like a machine doing all kinds of algorithms, and then it's spitting out magic, which is basically this is what you should read. And what David says is about like these technologies is absolutely right. That Amazon, I met a guy from Amazon back in that was about when I wrote that article, so it's been around 2003, and they have been doing personalization technologies for a couple of years back then. And he said, we've been tweaking this and tweaking this and tweaking this and tweaking this to get the right results. And this is, I mean, that's 8 years ago, and they've been tweaking a lot since then. So their personalization engine is like their specific personalization engine. So there is no kind of automatic magic about this. There is some magic, and then there's a lot of tweaking and tweaking and tweaking. But Bo, who's going to speak later today, is probably, he's way more proficient in this area than I am. And then finally, and this is probably, this is what I think is the most interesting thing happening right now, because that's also the area where I'm kind of running my own little startup in my social news project. This is the social filtering. And this is basically based on the fact that what's happened on the internet the last 4 or 5 years is that we are getting more and more knowledge about who are people, because people are giving away that knowledge. They log into Facebook, they tell everybody everything about who they are, who are their friends, etc. The same thing on Twitter, same thing on Foursquare, all of these different sites. And a lot of different companies are starting to exploit all that data. The latest thing now is that Facebook introduced this thing where news sites like, and music sites like Spotify, so news sites like Guardian, Washington Post in this case, I think The Independent are some of the early starters in this, and then Spotify. Basically, whenever you read a news article or you listen to something in Spotify, it's just shoved into Facebook. And I mean, the interesting thing is that I'm not sure that people really realize how radical this is, because this is like everything I read on Washington Post, everything I read in The Guardian is posted on Facebook. It's not just that I like to share this article because this is interesting, or I go to my social news, which is my site, and then I share my news on this specific site. This is like everything I read on these websites goes into Facebook. All the music that I'm listening to on Spotify is thrown into this thing here.
You can turn it off.
Sorry?
You can turn it off.
You can turn it off, but why would you?
I will.
Yes, but you're probably also a little older than the person. Yeah, but
That's really you're
well, you're right, because age is actually irrelevant. It's more of a mental age thing that I mean, there are some people
keep going.
I see, I mean, I'm 39, as I said. A lot of people my age are basically like Facebook. I would never touch that. I would never share it in there. I would never do stuff like that. And then I have friends my age and myself. I don't have a problem with this at all. And it's basically, I mean, you would call it radical transparency, and we're moving into a world where people are going to share everything. I'm a little excited to see what's going to happen with this Facebook thing, because when they open up for it for real, I think there's going to be some repercussions. But I think at the end of the day, we will end up seeing that people will just share everything. And it is fantastically, incredibly interesting. I mean, and super relevant. This guy, one of my friends, and I think at least 3 of those articles that he's sharing there were interesting, and I've read them because he read them. So the personalization aspect of this is just fantastic. And it's actually, sometimes it's even more, it turns out it's sometimes even more relevant than what you get from Google or what you get from Amazon. And I think, and that is, if you look at the meta, the big perspective on the internet, what's happening today, the big power struggle on the internet today is that basically, in my perspective, is between the mathematical quants, the math guys, and the social guys. And the math guys are Google and partly Amazon. These are the people who think they can do recommendations and kind of solve the world with mathematical algorithms. And then you have Mark Zuckerberg on the other side saying, the way you do recommendations and the way you kind of troll the internet and find relevant stuff for people is using the social graph. And those two things, it's basically the struggle between mathematical filtering and social filtering is kind of the big struggle today. Google spent millions and millions building Google+, which is their attempt to move into the social area, to become part of that whole social filtering thing. And they're not really getting it. They're trying, but they're not really. Google Plus is, even though they say it's doing fantastic, it's not doing very well. So, personalization and library. So if we look at these 5 elements, this is basically kind of my vision. I think David actually talked about some of these things already. I don't think interactive elements is not really that relevant. So if we start looking at, how would customization be relevant for libraries? Well, it could be something like subscribing to subjects. If on your library you say, okay, I'm interested in this subject because now I'm doing this course. Send me everything, all the everything new articles, new books, whatever which is relevant to this subject. Subscribe, same thing when it comes to authors. Then also, this is one of the scenarios where people are actually spending a lot. They are students, or they are researchers. They spend a lot of time doing this stuff. They may actually be the kind of people who would create a personal dashboard where you say, okay, I'm interested in that subject, that author, and whenever I visit this page, I get new information about all of this stuff. Rule-based personalization. Well, simply people who search for phenomenology should see more of this next time they search. So if people have shown that they're interested in subjects, well, maybe you could create rules that will show them more of the same stuff. But it could also be stuff like people who are searching for something for more than 5 minutes get a chat saying, "Are you lost?" This is a very common rule-based personalization on a lot of company websites. If people spend more than a certain amount of time on a website, then help them. And this is basically back to what I was talking about in the old library, that connection with the librarian is basically gone, and I think that is still very useful. I live in the digital world, and I love digital and all of the recommendation engines and all that stuff. And I think the more and more we get of that, the more we'll also kind of enjoy and like the meeting real people who can give us recommendations. And there's something about a personal, human recommendation which is different than machine recommendations. Mathematical filtering, David talked a lot about that. People who search for discipline and punish should also see the history of sexuality. Tell us your course name and we'll recommend literature. David talked about that. And this is and then the social filtering, this is more my area and what I'm working with. This is the area where you could do stuff like, what are the people at my course research group searching for? So this, basically, the way you could do that is when you enroll in a course, you could enroll in a group in the library on Facebook or wherever it was. And in this group, you could see what are other people searching for. Of course, there's a lot of privacy issues there, so should it be personalized or should it be aggregated? You have to figure that out. But the interesting thing is that when I was a student, when I enrolled in the course, I had no idea what the other people in the course were searching for. Even though that could have been interesting information, I was actually, one of my last courses at Statesmanskab was with one of the guys from Blekinge-Gadebanden, and I would have thought it pretty interesting to know what kind of literature that he was reading. Then you could create personal profiles where people actually share their searches and what they're reading. Again, some privacy issues, but that's also what we're seeing in a lot of other areas. I was part of building websites for stock trading, where people basically show, they build a stock portfolio, so they buy stocks in Maersk and Novo or whatever, and then they show that portfolio for the rest of the world to follow them. So if they are successful with their portfolio, people say, oh, this guy made 15% off of his investment last year, maybe I should do some of the stuff that he's doing, or read his blog and actually follow him. Same thing can be done with books and all kinds of knowledge. create subject groups where people can share search within specific areas. It's a little like the first idea. And then I think David also mentioned that, very inspired by my favorite music site, Last.fm, which basically analyzes my musical behavior, or the music that I like and the music that I listen to, and then it finds musical neighbors, people who are like me. For some reason it's always 19-year-old Eastern European girls who like the same music that I like. But what the interesting thing here is that when you're recommended a neighbor, let's say that Jens was my neighbor, then I could go to look at Jens's profile and see what is he reading. And of course a lot of the books would be, or the articles would be the same article, but maybe there would be like one specific article that I hadn't seen. So there's like, and that adds that element of serendipity, that kind of discovery that is really difficult to get from just that search field, where you really need to know what you're looking for. So that then leads us to some of the dangers. And actually that article I wrote in Copenhagen was a review of this book called The Filter Bubble by Eli Pariser. And I mean, if you in any way work in this field, I can very much recommend this book. This is like this is totally the dark side of personalization and personal data and all these questions. Actually, there are two books right now that are quite interesting. There's one by Jeff Jarvis, which is called Public Parts, which is like everything should be shared. I share everything. It's fantastic. There's no limits to it. Just forget about privacy. It's like old school. It's hopeless. And then there's this guy who's like, okay, watch out. There are actually some things that you should watch out for in this world. And basically what he's saying is that you should watch out for what he calls filter bubbles, which is these bubbles of information that will start to live in when everything becomes personalized. And then he starts out with saying that, well, we always lived in filter bubbles. I've been reading, my parents read Politiken, I've been reading Politiken my entire life, and that's definitely a filter problem, because when you read Politiken, then it's that little world of that's like The Guardian in Denmark. So it's that little world where it's the same opinions, it's the same people writing the op-eds and the articles and everything. You basically know what you get when you read Politiken. You live in this little bubble world. Fox News in the US is as an example of a completely opposite bubble, but still a bubble different. So we always lived in these filter bubbles. But these digital bubbles are different. And there are three reasons why they're different. First of all, we are alone in these bubbles. Because in the case of Politiken or Fox, we were in a bubble, but in the case of Politiken, we're in a bubble with approximately 100,000 other people reading the same newspaper. So we knew that there were other people who were kind of like us, and when we knew that, we also knew that there were probably also people who were not like us, who were kind of opposite to us, the people reading Jyllandsposten. But in these digital bubbles where everything becomes personalized, we're actually alone. It's just our own little bubble. Because what I get on Last.fm is completely unique compared to what everybody else is getting. The other thing is that very often the filter bubble is invisible. So a lot of the times people will go to these websites with recommendations and personalization, and they don't even know that there is this filter bubble. They just get relevant information, and it's fine. And I think for a lot of the people in this room, probably we know that stuff is being filtered because we lived in a world that didn't have the internet, and so we're kind of used to saying, well, this is fantastic, but I mean, I have two little sisters, one is 24 and the other one is 16, and the one that's 16, I don't think she thinks of this as personalization or filter bubbles or anything. She's just like, yeah, that's the relevant information, and if it comes to me, it's probably relevant. And then very often you don't choose the filter bubble yourself. You said earlier, well, you can turn it off in Facebook. Yes, you can, but it's kind of a little tedious to do it, and a lot of sites don't really promote that thing that you can turn off the filter bubble, because their whole business is based on the filter bubble. My own site, My Social News, I mean, it would be meaningless to turn off the filter bubble, because then there would be no point in using my site. So that's why it's different. So, and why is it dangerous then? Well, first of all, what Paris is saying, it destroys this common agenda. And it's basically, I mean, it's all about that if we all live in these little bubbles, then there's no common agenda, and how can you create a democracy if there isn't a common agenda where you know that there are some people who have the same opinion as me and some people who don't have the same opinion as me. Then there's this thing about people get stuck in one perspective. If this is also, I mean, what people are saying about Fox News, so this is not what solely in the digital world, but it's getting worse in the digital world because if you constantly get information which is kind of seeped through your friends and mathematical algorithms, and it's always the kind of information that you like, it's the sweet candy that you like that just keeps on coming to you, then you'll never see the other perspective. And then Paris is also talking about the death of creativity, and basically the thinking is that when you always get what you like, then you never see the other things, you're never surprised, and what creativity is all about is being surprised. You need kind of other perspectives and see things in a different perspective, and sometimes you will end up simply being creatively lazy if you just get information served on a plate constantly. So, what should we do as filter builders? And I guess there are probably a couple of those in this room. There are basically 4 things that we should think about when we're to avoid these filters. Yes. First of all, one thing that's really important is to make filters transparent. So it's basically about telling people that now information is being filtered. Personally, I know that Google, a couple of years back, they actually changed their search algorithms. So when you search for something, what you get out of Google is not the same as when Bo searches for something, because Google knows something about me and something about Bo, and then they use that information to give people different results. And I'm pretty sure that 99% of the people who are using Google today have no idea that this is actually going on. And that's basically because Google are not providing a button saying, show me the unpersonalized or the unfiltered search. They do have that button, but it's hidden somewhere, and I've been trying to look for it, and it's pretty hard to find. And as a filter builder, you should make that easier. You should tell people when you're filtering and make that pretty transparent. And that leads directly to the other thing, that you should make it possible to opt out of filters. So if there are kind of information is heavily filtered, make it easy. Like big button saying, I don't want the filter now, but maybe I want it later. So, and then combine machine filters with human filters. And there are many things that I think, first of all, of course, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes it's just nice to meet human beings, but sometimes machine filters can also just create weird recommendations where human filters actually can kind of interfere with that and say, yeah, well, maybe the machine this is what it's saying, but this would actually be better. And then this is actually directly from Paris's book. He's saying build in more randomness, and that is basically, if you look at how the filters on Amazon and Google today, they are so perfect that they are actually creating these like really close filter bubbles where you end up seeing just the stuff that is solely relevant to you, and you never see anything out of that bubble. And what he's saying is, well, be less perfect. I mean, throw in some serendipity, some like pleasant surprises or unpleasant surprises. There just needs to be some more randomness. Your filters should be less good, which of course, if you're a business, maybe that could mean this is where what Bo probably knows, because he's working with this from a business perspective, that if you build in more randomness in your filter, then you will maybe lose 1% of your revenue, because like if your recommendations are not the best, then you make less money. So this is like, there's a balance here. So, I mean, build in more randomness, it'll cost you money. But still important, if you want people to kind of still have a good user experience where they can be surprised, you need to have some kind of randomness built in there. So basically, the thing is, we need these filters because we are living in a world which looks like this. There's just too much information. And but we need to build responsible filters, and that's basically the conclusion.
Thank you.
Thanks.
8 minutes for some questions. So now we have an outsider, a guy who doesn't work in the library world, and he hasn't worked that much with libraries. So we should take this chance and ask him some questions. Yeah?
Yeah.
Can I ask?
Definitely.
So I would distinguish between homophily, which is what you get in Fox News, sticking with the people you like, and the filter bubble, which is this kind of conspiratorial idea that it's walling you off. I don't know if you followed the controversy over the book, but a lot of people have been saying that it's just not true, that when different people search for Obama in different parts of the country, it's basically the same results. And that a lot of the things he was claiming aren't true. Maybe this is irrelevant because it will be true, but what's your feeling?
Well, I totally agree, and I mean, I did a review of this book, which doesn't mean that I agree with everything that he said. I mean, as I said, I'm also in the business of doing, creating filter bubbles, and I think that, I think that filter bubbles and creating filters and recommendations sometimes creates even more serendipity than the old world did, So, but especially, I mean, my experience is when I use music recommendation sites, I tend to listen to more music than I ever did in the old world. I mean, in the old world, I had to go to a record store, I had to talk to the guy in the record store, and then he would maybe recommend me like one new strange record that I hadn't heard of. Like on Last.fm, I'll get 10 new records every day that are different. So there's a lot of serendipity in the filtering world. But I think, I mean, the danger, and I've been trying to pull out like the most relevant points from this book, is that I still think that there is, the main danger of the filter bubble is that it's hidden and it's invisible, that sometimes people tend to forget that this is actually a filtered world. And so what you, again, the music example, maybe I'll get 10 new recommendations of artists that I wouldn't have heard of, but it's within a specific genre of music. And maybe it will never recommend classical music to me because it thinks this guy will never listen to classical music. So I mean, I think it goes both ways. But I mean, that's why also I was trying to recommend the two books, because I think Paris's book is like way out there, super paranoid about it's really dangerous, and that's why it's interesting to read. I mean, that's what you Americans can do. You're very good at like saying this is what I stand for, this is my opinion, and that's really extreme. So whereas we Europeans sometimes tend to be a little more boring, and it's like both and either or, so on and so on.
Yeah, more questions?
Not really a question, but when you make it very apparent to people that they're sharing stuff, I feel you end up in an area where people moderate or modify their own behavior. Because I may not want to read this article because I don't want to share that I've read about Paris Hilton.
Yeah.
Is this something you hear from users in user experience groups, or am I just too old to?
No, but it's probably too early to discuss that because it's still out there, and a lot of these things that Facebook is working on now is like specifically in that area, but I think yes, of course people will modify their behavior, but I think that is the way we've been seeing the internet develop, that when people realize that okay, when I'm on The Guardian or The Independent or Washington Post, then I know I'm sharing everything, and that goes to Facebook. So suddenly that becomes part of your public profile. And then when you want to do more shady stuff that you don't want to share with the rest of the world, then you'll go to other sites, or you'll click that button which says non-share or whatever. And I think also these sites on my own site, what we're going to start to work on is like the opt-in and opt-out buttons, which makes it really easy for people to say, okay, now I'm sharing, now I'm not sharing. And probably even more importantly is like, oops, I shouldn't have shared that. Get it out of there and actually make it disappear, which is probably one of the most important, difficult things on the internet. Because if something is out there, it's very difficult to retract. But I think, we're definitely going to think about all of these issues, like how do we make people opt in and out on kind of while they're using these interfaces.
Do you think that the library should build their own share this button, or should we use the Facebook connection?
Well, yes, I mean, most of the time, and I think maybe it's also because I work in Denmark most of the time, and Denmark is such a small market. Most of the time, I'm saying to people, well, use what's out there. If Facebook provides what's relevant for you, then use it. If it's Twitter, then use that. If a Bo's company has built some kind of engines that are relevant for you, then use that, because it's kind of already built and you don't have to build it yourself. But I mean, sometimes you also need to build things for yourself. I mean, definitely my recommendation is always, especially in this social media world where it's also about not being just on your own website, but also being present on Facebook, Twitter, and kind of deportalizing your presence. I mean, I always recommend people, well, look at what's out there before you build something yourself.
There's a question here.
Yeah, just one paranoid question. One observation. In the book, he mentions that the company Axiom knows 95% of all Americans and has about 1,500 entries on each person. I think it is. Do you know of a similar information gathering?
In Denmark? Yeah. No, I was a little surprised reading those things as well. I'm pretty sure that there's not something quite similar in Denmark, but I mean, these companies work in Denmark as well. I mean, because a lot of this stuff is becoming international, so when a Danish company is buying advertising space, then that's bought through a network which then buys into the data of these guys, and then they serve like ads back to your Danish websites. I mean, and that's why when you visit international websites, you very often experience that there are banners in Danish and from Danish companies, and because this thing is growing international. But I think that was probably the really scary, creepy thing about that book is like that there are some companies out there who really know a lot about what's you and your personal profile.
They process so much data, they have their own power plant.
Yeah.
The other thing is I work in an academic library. We have the books in order of acquisition, so no topical order. Even so, a lot of users browse the shelves. Researchers, senior researchers, whatever.
The physical shelves?
Yes,
yeah.
they just like to browse, very random.
Yeah.
This I would consider making a similar function in my my user interface.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know exactly how to do it, but
it's probably one of the most difficult things. And if you solve that, I mean, please send me an email because I think that's, browsing is the most difficult thing to do in the digital world. And look, Amazon has that look inside the book functionality, and now they've tried doing this random kind of where you kind of dive into random spots in the book. And it's kind of there, but it's not. It doesn't feel the same way, because there's something about flicking through a book and then suddenly something catches your eye and then you start reading. And yeah, we were just talking about that when you're reading ebooks. There's also a big difference from kind of just that feeling of having a book that you can flick through the book and that kind of thing where with the ebook. Of course you can search, you can do a lot of things in an ebook that you can't do in a real book, but that feeling of visually getting back to something that was interesting is really difficult to do in an ebook.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, just before we go to lunch, David, you said that you had the most important slide of the day. I thought I had that one. And it's also an ontology, also with colored boxes. You have three colors of post-it notes. You have an orange one, and today we're going to use these in a structured way, because when you go to lunch, you will probably discuss what happened before lunch. And when we get back, we're going to write down a few thoughts on these notes. And on the orange ones, you will write thoughts about how can you use user tracks when you get home, after this conference, tomorrow, and the days after that. What can you do? And On the green ones, green is usually positive, but well, problems can be positive, they're there to be solved. What seems to be blocking for using user tracks in your organization? You also want to know that. And on the pink notes, you can put anything else you have on your heart. So we'll do that after lunch, and we'll just put them up here. It'll be interesting for all of us to read it, and especially the speakers, because they might be able to answer a few of these questions or reflect on them. So that might inspire you in your discussion during lunch in a few minutes. I just have a few great quotes here. This one was from David Kay. We're not forcing people into mediocrity with our recommendation engines. You have to make up your own algorithm. Don't just try to figure out what Amazon.com did. We have an advantage in data, very inspiring. It is hard to make evidence of a business case, you said, and I think a few slides after you showed this one. So I think at least that's one business case.